A family photo from 1895 looks normal. When they zoom in on the girl, they discover something. The humidity in New Orleans made everything stick, papers to fingertips, shirts to skin. Vivian Rousseau wiped her forehead and adjusted the desk fan in her cramped office at the Louisiana Historical Archives. August in the city was relentless, but the climate-controlled vault, where the photographs were stored, remained mercifully cool. She had spent 3 months cataloging the TME collection, hundreds of photographs, documents, and artifacts from one of America's oldest African-American neighborhoods. Most items had been donated by families cleaning out attics and estate sales, pieces of history saved from dumpsters and obscurity. Vivian opened a mahogany box lined with aged velvet. Inside was a single photograph in an ornate gilt frame, remarkably well preserved. The image showed 3 people posed in what appeared to be a prosperous parlor. Heavy curtains framed a window in the background, and a patterned rug covered polished wooden floors. The couple sat in upholstered chairs, the man in a fine dark suit with a watch chain visible across his vest. The woman in an elaborate dress, with leg of mutton sleeves and intricate beading. Between them stood a girl of about 10, wearing a white dress with layers of lace and ribbon. Her hair was styled in careful ringlets, and she held a book in her small hands. The composition radiated pride and prosperity. This was not a casual snapshot, but a formal portrait. The kind that cost significant money in 1895. Families commissioned such photographs to document their success, prove their respectability, create heirlooms. Vivian turned the frame over carefully. A label on the back, written in flowing script, read, "The Beaumont Family, November 1895, Faro Photography Studio, Royal Street." She recognized the studio name. Armand Faro had been one of New Orleans' premier photographers in the late 19th century, known for portraits of the city's Creole elite. His clients included some of the wealthiest free people of color in the South. Vivian returned the photograph to proper lighting and examined it more closely with her magnifying glass. The details were exquisite. She could see the grain of the wooden furniture, the texture of the fabrics, even the titles on the spines of books on a shelf behind the family. Then her eye caught something at the girl's neckline, a shadow, or perhaps a mark, just visible above the lace collar. She adjusted her magnifying glass and leaned closer. What she saw made her hand freeze mid-movement, her breath catching in her throat. Vivian set up the photograph under her high-resolution scanner, her hands moving with practiced precision, despite the tremor of anticipation running through them. The device, acquired by the archives just 6 months earlier, could capture details far beyond what the human eye could perceive. She initiated the scan at maximum resolution and watched as the machine's light bar crawled across the photograph's surface. When the scan completed, she imported the massive file into her image analysis software. On her computer screen, the Beaumont family appeared in stunning clarity. She zoomed in on the girl's face and neck area, her heart beating faster. The lace collar sat high on the child's throat, covering most of her neck. But where the fabric parted slightly, skin was visible. And on that skin were marks. Vivian enhanced the contrast and adjusted the lighting filters. The marks became clearer, not shadows, not photographic artifacts, but deliberate scarring, linear patterns, raised tissue forming specific shapes. She could make out letters or numbers, though partially obscured by the collar and the angle of the photograph. Her stomach tightened. She had seen similar marks before in her research on slavery in the antebellum South. Enslaved people had sometimes been branded or scarred with their enslavers' initials or identification numbers, brutal, dehumanizing, treating human beings as property. But this photograph was taken in 1895, 30 years after the 13th Amendment. The girl in this portrait would have been born around 1885, 2 decades into freedom. No child born in that era should carry slave marks. Vivian zoomed in further, examining every visible inch of the scarring. She could definitely make out the letter M and what might be the number 7 or the letter J. The marks were old and well-healed, suggesting they had been made years before the photograph. She sat back, staring at the full image again. The Beaumonts looked prosperous, educated, respectable. Everything about the photograph proclaimed freedom, dignity, and success, except for those scars hidden beneath a little girl's collar. Vivian opened her notes and began typing. Beaumont family, 1,895. Possible slave markings on child born post-emancipation. Inconsistent with timeline. Need to investigate. Family history. Child's origin. Legal records. Adoption documents. She pulled up the Louisiana Vital Records database and began searching for birth certificates and family records. The name Beaumont was common in the New Orleans Creole community, but she needed specifics, first names, addresses, anything. The Louisiana State Archives in Baton Rouge housed many undigitized records from the 1,890. So Vivian made the drive the next morning. Her car loaded with copies of the photograph and preliminary research. The research room was quiet, populated by genealogists and a graduate student working on a dissertation. Vivian requested all records for anyone named Beaumont in Orleans Parish, between 1,880 and 1,900. A clerk eventually wheeled out 3 boxes of documents. She started with birth records. She found several Beaumont children born in the 1880, but matching them to the family in the photograph required cross-referencing addresses and parents' names. Then she found something promising. Beaumont, Marie Claire, born November 3, 1885, to parents Etienne Beaumont and Josephine Beaumont, née Navo. Residence 427 Esplanade Avenue. The girl in the photo looked about 10 in 1895. The timing matched. She searched for more records on Etienne and Josephine. Etienne appeared in the 1890 city directory as a merchant and property owner with a Canal Street business. Josephine appeared in society notices fundraisers, church activities, charitable events. A prominent family, no doubt. But where had Marie Claire gotten those scars? Vivian requested adoption records next. Louisiana had formal adoption proceedings since the 1870, though many Creole adoptions were informal. Still, she found a document dated March 1891 that made her pulse quicken. Petition for adoption. Etienne and Josephine Beaumont, seeking to legally adopt Marie Claire. Approximate age: 6. Currently in their care. Child's origins: unclear. Petition granted, April 1891. But Marie Claire was already listed on an 1,885 birth certificate as their biological daughter. Something wasn't adding up. In property records, Vivian found a deed dated January 1891, showing Etienne Beaumont purchasing a small house in Plaquemines Parish, about 70 miles south of New Orleans. The price was $800 high for a modest structure. She noted, adoption finalized April 1891. Property purchased January 1891, 3 months earlier. Connection? Why would a wealthy New Orleans merchant buy rural property in Plaquemines Parish? She requested all Plaquemines Parish records from 1,891,891, knowing they would take days to arrive. Meanwhile, there was another lead, the Pharaoh Photography Studio records. Armand Pharaoh's granddaughter had donated his business archives in the 1960. Appointment books, client lists, ledgers, and a detailed log describing each photograph taken. Vivian spent an afternoon in the reading room, carefully turning the pages of Pharaoh's 1,895 appointment book. The entries were meticulous, written in precise French dates, times, clients' names, type of portrait, and often brief notes about the sitting. Vivian found the entry for November 1895. Beaumont family portrait, M. et MM. Etienne Beaumont. Daughter Marie Claire. Full formal setting, 3 poses taken. Client requested highest quality. Important family record. Payment, $25. $25 was expensive for that era, the equivalent of roughly $800 today. The Beaumonts had spared no expense, but it was Pharaoh's personal notes, written in smaller script at the bottom of the entry, that made Vivian's breath catch. The child, very still, well-behaved. Madame Beaumont, particular about the girl's collar, adjusted it multiple times before allowing exposure. The child bears marks at the throat, visible despite careful positioning. Did not inquire. Family's private matter, but such marks on one so young trouble the conscience. Pharaoh had seen the scars. He had noticed them being deliberately concealed, and he had been troubled enough to record his observation. Vivian checked the studio's financial records. In January 1891, the same month Etienne had purchased the Plaquemines property, there was an entry showing a $50 payment to Pharaoh with the notation, "Special Commission. Discretion required. No archive copies." $50, twice the cost of the formal family portrait. For what? What kind of photographic work required such secrecy? Her mind raced. Had Pharaoh photographed Marie Claire when she first arrived at the Beaumonts' home? Had he documented something the family wanted kept hidden? The studio records indicated that Pharaoh preserved glass plate negatives of all his work, stored chronologically. The collection's curator had told Vivian that most plates from the 1,890 survived, carefully preserved in acid-free storage. She requested access to the January 1,891 plates. 2 hours later, she sat at a light table with a box of glass negatives, each sleeved and labeled. She worked through them one by one. January 1. A wedding portrait. January 5. A family with 3 children. January 9. An elderly man in formal dress. Then she reached a plate, dated the 12th of January 1891, labeled only with a number. Private Commission, 127. Vivian lifted the plate carefully and held it toward the light. The image revealed a small child, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, standing against a plain backdrop. The child wore a simple dress. Her hair was uncombed and tangled. Her expression was haunted, eyes wide, face thin. And around her neck, clearly visible, were the scars, letters, and numbers. "I'm 7J. Vivian stared, her hands trembling. This was Marie Claire, before the Beaumonts, before the fine dresses, before the careful hairstyling, before lace collars were used to hide her scars. This was documentation of a rescued child. Vivian drove south on Highway UN, following the Mississippi River through Louisiana's sugarcane country. The landscape was flat and green, broken by clusters of houses and rusting remains of old plantation structures. Plaquemines Parish was still rural, its economy tied to agriculture as it had been for centuries. The parish courthouse, in the town of Plaquemines, was a modest brick building. Vivian had called ahead, and the clerk, Dorothy, who had worked there for 30 years, had pulled records related to the property Etienne Beaumont purchased in 1891. "It's unusual," Dorothy said, spreading documents across a table. "City folks didn't usually buy property out here unless they had family or business ties. And this particular piece of land," she pointed to a property map, "it wasn't farmable. Just a small house and a few acres of scrub." Vivian examined the deed. The previous owner was listed as the estate of Jacques Mercier, deceased. A note indicated the property had been seized for unpaid taxes and sold at auction, with Etienne Beaumont being the only bidder. "Do you have any records on Jacques Mercier?" Vivian asked. Dorothy retrieved a slim folder. "Not much. He died in 1890. No known heirs. Property went to the parish. But there's this." She handed Vivian a sheriff's report dated November 1890. The report described a raid on Mercier's property after neighbors filed complaints. What the sheriff found shocked Vivian. Upon investigation of the Mercier residence, discovered 3 Negro children, ages approximately 4 to 8, being held in conditions of servitude. Children bore marks of branding and physical abuse. Mercier claimed children were apprenticed to him legally, but produced no documentation. Children removed to parish custody. Mercier charged with unlawful detention and assault. 3 children. One of them must have been Marie Claire. Vivian's hands shook as she read further. Children unable to provide information about their origins appear to have been taken at young ages, with no memory of families. Scars indicate they may have been marked by previous captors. Investigation into broader trafficking operation recommended. What happened to Jacques Mercier? Vivian asked. Dorothy consulted a note. Died in parish jail before trial. Heart failure, according to the death certificate. The case was closed, and the children were placed in an orphanage in New Orleans Street Mary's home for colored children. Pieces were clicking into place. Marie Claire had been rescued from Mercier's property in late 1890, placed in an orphanage, and adopted by the Beaumonts in early 1891. But why had Etienne purchased the Mercier property? She found the answer in a legal document dated February 1891. Testimony of Etienne Beaumont in the matter of children rescued from Mercier property. Beaumont stated that upon learning of the children held in Plaquemines Parish, he investigated personally. He purchased the property to secure any evidence or documentation that might identify the children. Among the items found were ledgers indicating Mercier had been part of a larger operation, kidnapping freeborn black children and selling them into illegal servitude. Etienne wasn't concealing a crime, he was trying to uncover one. Back in New Orleans, Vivian requested surviving records from Street Mary's home for colored children. The orphanage had closed in 1924, and most of its archives were damaged in Hurricane Betsy in 1965. But some ledgers survived. What she found was heartbreaking. The intake records from November 1890 listed 3 children brought from Plaquemines Parish. Child 1. Female. Approx. 6 years. Unable to state name. Bears marking M. 7J. On neck. Child 2. Male. Approx. 8 years. Unable to state name. Bears marking M4P on shoulder. Child 3. Female. Approx. 4 years. Unable to state name. Bears marking M2K on back. The children were so young when taken that they couldn't remember their own names or families. They had been reduced to letters and numbers branded into their skin. Vivian found correspondence from the orphanage director to authorities, pleading for help identifying the children. One letter to the New Orleans Police Department from December 1890 read, "We believe these children were kidnapped from their families and held in servitude as part of a criminal enterprise across multiple parishes. The markings suggest systematic identification, possibly indicating many more victims. We implore your department to investigate thoroughly." The police response was brief. Matter investigated. No evidence of broader conspiracy. Children likely orphaned by yellow fever or other epidemic. Taken in by Mercier with good intentions. Unfortunate situation. But no crime proven. No crime proven. Despite the scars, despite the conditions, despite everything. But Etienne Beaumont hadn't accepted that. Vivian found letters he had written to sheriffs across Louisiana asking about missing children and similar cases. One reply from Street James Parish in March 1891 mentioned, "We had a similar case in 1888. Family reported daughter taken from a church picnic. Girl age 3, named Clara. Never found. Markings match a child seen at a work camp upriver. Camp raided, but most children moved before arrival." Vivian spent the next week tracking missing children reports from 1885, 1890. A chilling pattern emerged. Dozens of disappearances, mostly from poor rural families, mostly very young children. Cases rarely investigated. Children found in servitude placed in orphanages, almost never reunited with families. And the marking system suggested organization. M7J likely meant something. Maybe the M indicated the trafficker Mercier. The number might have indicated sequence or location, and the final letter could have marked age group, gender, or destination. Vivian found a report from a federal investigator dated 1892, a full year after Marie Claude's adoption, outlining a network of kidnapping and re-enslavement operating across the South. The investigator estimated that hundreds of children had been taken and sold to farms, work camps, and private households as unpaid labor. The report concluded bitterly that despite clear evidence of systematic child trafficking, local authorities showed little interest in prosecution. Many victims came from families too poor or powerless to seek justice. The investigation, it said, was closed due to lack of cooperation from local officials. Vivian found Etienne Beaumont's personal papers in the archives of the Amistad Research Center at Tulane University. The collection included business correspondence, property records, and most significantly, a private journal he kept from 1890 to 1895. She requested the journal and waited anxiously as it was brought from climate-controlled storage. The leather-bound book was fragile, its pages yellowed but legible. Etienne's handwriting was elegant and precise, his entries detailed and often emotional. The entry dated November 20th, 1890, made Vivian's eyes fill with tears. Etienne wrote, "Today I learned of the children found in Plaquemine. 3 souls stolen from their families, marked like animals, used as slaves 30 years after emancipation, supposedly ended such horrors. The police say there is nothing to be done. The man who held them is dead. The children cannot remember their origins. They will go to an orphanage and likely never know who they truly are. I cannot accept this. Josephine and I have been blessed with wealth and position. If we do not use these advantages to fight such injustice, what purpose does our prosperity serve? I have resolved to investigate personally. If these children have families searching for them, I will find those families." Over the following months, Etienne documented his investigation. He visited the Mercier property and found ledgers hidden beneath a false floor records of children taken, along with dates, locations, and buyers. He copied everything and turned the originals over to federal authorities, though he noted bitterly that he had little faith they would act. The entry dated January 10th, 1891, described meeting Marie Claire for the first time at Street Mary's orphanage. The child they call number 7 is small for her age, with large eyes that have seen too much suffering. When I showed her the ledger entries, hoping to find anything that might identify her origins, she touched the marking on her neck and said only, "Mama," through tears. It is the first personal memory she has shared with anyone here. The marking reads M7J. According to Mercier's ledgers, she was acquired in July 1887, near Thibodaux. Age approximately 2. The J may indicate July. The seller was listed only as Dupont, likely an alias. I have written to authorities in Lafourche Parish, asking about any reports of a missing child from that time. Vivian flipped ahead. Etienne's investigation consumed him. He traveled across southern Louisiana, interviewed dozens of families who had lost children, and spent large sums hiring private investigators. He found the families of the 2 other children rescued from Mercier's house and arranged emotional reunions, but Marie Claire's family remained elusive. No one in Thibodaux or surrounding areas recognized her or the circumstances of her disappearance. The trail went cold. The entry for March 15th, 1891, detailed a painful decision. After 4 months of searching, I have found no trace of Marie Claire's family. It is possible they died in the yellow fever epidemic of 1888. It is possible they moved away, or that the records were simply lost. I cannot continue indefinitely, and the child remains in an orphanage waiting. Josephine and I have decided to adopt her. We will give her our name, our home, our love. We will tell her the truth when she is old enough to understand, and we will never stop hoping that her original family might one day be found. Vivian's research took an unexpected turn when she received an email from a descendant of the Beaumont family. Margaret Thibodeau, a retired teacher living in Lafayette, had seen a news article about Vivian's work at the Louisiana Historical Archives and recognized her great-great-grandmother's maiden name, Beaumont. They met at a cafe in the French Quarter. Margaret brought a box of family papers stored in her attic for decades, letters, photographs, and documents passed down through generations, but never examined. "My grandmother always said there were family secrets," Margaret explained. "She died before she could tell me what they were. Maybe these papers will help." Sarm. Vivian opened the box. Inside were bundles of letters tied with ribbon, organized by date. Most were routine, but one bundle stood out. Correspondence between Josephine Beaumont and a nun named Sister Marie T.Z., who worked at Street Mary's orphanage. The letters spanned 1,895 to 1,910, long after Marie Claire's adoption. Vivian read them. Most discussed fundraising, church events, and social matters. Then, she found a letter from 1,897 that made her pulse quicken. "Dear Josephine, I write with news that may bring both joy and sorrow. A woman came to the orphanage yesterday, asking about children who passed through our care in 1890. She has been searching for her daughter, taken from her in Thibodeau in 1887, when the child was just 2. The woman was herself enslaved at that time, illegally held on a remote farm, long after the war's end. She escaped in 1889 but could not return for her daughter until she had established herself in New Orleans and earned enough to hire an investigator. She described a small birthmark, a crescent moon on the child's left shoulder blade. She remembered, too, that the man who took the child was called Dupont, though she believes this was a false name. Josephine, I believe this woman may be Marie Claire's mother. I did not tell her anything definite, but I gave her your address. I hope I have not overstepped, but a mother's love deserves the chance to be reunited with her child." Vivian's hands trembled. Marie Claire's mother had found her after 10 years of separation, after escaping illegal enslavement, after saving for years to search. But what had happened next? Had Josephine allowed the reunion? Had Marie Claire, raised as a Beaumont for 6 years, remembered her birth mother? The answer lay in the next letter, written 2 weeks later in Josephine's hand. "Dear Sister Marie T.Z., I must tell you what transpired when Claudine Thibodeau came to our home. I admit I felt fear at first. Fear we might lose Marie Claire, whom we love as dearly as if she were born to us. But when Claudine saw Marie Claire, and Marie Claire saw her, something extraordinary happened. The child, who had no conscious memory of her mother, ran to her immediately. She said, 'You're the lady from my dreams.' They held each other and wept, and I wept with them. Etienne and I faced an impossible decision. Legally, Marie Claire is our adopted daughter. We could have refused Claudine access. But how could we deny a mother who suffered so much to find her child? How could we deny Marie Claire the chance to know her birth mother? We invited Claudine to stay for several days, so she and Marie Claire could spend time together. The stories she told were heartbreaking. She had been born free in Thibodeau in 1865. Her parents died of fever when she was young, and at 16, she was tricked by a man offering employment, and instead, imprisoned on a remote farm. Forced to work without pay, she became pregnant and assaulted by the overseer and gave birth to Marie Claire in 1885. For 2 years, she cared for her child while planning escape. But when Marie Claire was 2, she was taken and sold to a man Claudine knew only as Dupont. Claudine was told that if she tried to escape or report what happened, her daughter would be killed. She finally escaped in 1889, when the farm owner died and the estate was sold. She made her way to New Orleans, took work as a laundress, saved everything, and eventually hired an investigator. It took 8 years to find her daughter. Marie Claire sat with her mother for hours, asking questions and memorizing every detail of her face. Then she asked the question we dreaded. Do I have to leave Papa Etienne and Mama Josephine? The room fell silent. Claudine looked at me, tears in her eyes, and said, "No, my darling, you don't have to leave. You have been blessed with 2 mothers and 2 fathers who love you. I only want to be part of your life, if you'll have me. And so we have made an arrangement that defies convention but feels right. Claudine has taken a room near our home. She visits Mary Claire every week. Mary Claire calls her Mama Claudine and calls me Mama Josephine. The child now has 2 families, and we are all richer for it." Margaret wiped her eyes. "I never knew any of this." My grandmother spoke of Claudine as Aunt Claudine, a family friend. I had no idea she was Marie Claire's birth mother. Vivian found more letters documenting the unusual arrangement that had grown between the 2 families. Claudine became part of the Beaumont household's extended family. She taught Marie Claire traditional Creole songs, told her stories of their Thibodeau ancestors, and gave her the truth about where she came from. In an 1899 letter, Josephine wrote, "Mary Claire is now 14 and understands the full story of her early years. She knows about the kidnapping, the trafficking, the illegal enslavement. She knows about the scars on her neck and what they represent. We feared this knowledge would traumatize her, but instead, she has become passionate about justice. She speaks of becoming a lawyer or a teacher, of helping other children who have been wronged." Vivian found a photograph tucked among the letters, a group portrait from 1900, showing the Beaumont family gathered in their parlor. Etienne and Josephine sat in chairs, and Marie Claire stood between them, now a young woman of 15. Beside Josephine stood another woman, older, her face lined by hardship, but her eyes bright with joy. It was Claudine Thibodeau, Marie Claire's first mother, finally united with her daughter. 3 months after discovering the Beaumont family photograph, Vivian stood before a packed auditorium at Tulane University, preparing to present her findings. The event had drawn historians, genealogists, descendants of Louisiana's Creole families, and activists working on child trafficking and exploitation. On the screen behind her was the original 1895 photograph. The Beaumonts in their elegant parlor. Marie Claire in her lace-collared dress. But now, thanks to digital enhancement, a second image appeared beside it. A close-up of Marie Claire's neck. The scars visible. The letters M, 7J, clear enough to read. "This photograph," Vivian began, "is about concealment and revelation. The Beaumonts carefully posed their daughter to hide her scars, evidence of a traumatic past they wanted to shield her from. But they also preserved evidence of that past, perhaps knowing that one day the truth would need to be told." She clicked to the next slide. An 1891 photograph of Marie Claire before her adoption, thin and haunted, scars fully visible. Between these 2 images lies a story of extraordinary courage from multiple people. Jacques Mercier, who kidnapped and held children in illegal servitude. Etienne and Josephine Beaumont, who used their privilege to investigate his crimes and rescue the children. Claudine Thibodeau, who survived enslavement herself and never stopped searching for her stolen daughter. And Mary Claire, who endured trauma that would have broken many, yet built a life of purpose and advocacy. Vivian showed documents from her research. Etienne's journal entries, the ledgers from Mercier's house, the letters between Josephine and Sister Marie TZ, and the photograph of the 2 families united. "What makes this story particularly important," she continued, "is that it reveals a largely undocumented aspect of post-Civil War history. Slavery legally ended in 1865, but illegal enslavement continued for decades, particularly in the South. Children were especially vulnerable, kidnapped from poor families, marked like property, and sold into servitude on remote farms where authorities rarely ventured. The Beaumont's investigation uncovered a network that operated across Louisiana, involving dozens of perpetrators and potentially hundreds of victims. Most of these children were never reunited with their families. Their stories died with them. But Marie Claire's story survived because people cared enough to document it, to preserve evidence, and to fight for justice, even when authorities refused. She showed a final image, a newspaper article from 1915. The headline read, A.T. Attorney Marie Claire Beaumont, Thibodeau wins. Landmark case for child labor protections. Vivian explained that Marie Claire had grown up to become one of Louisiana's first black female lawyers. She specialized in cases involving child exploitation and illegal labor practices, successfully prosecuted several trafficking operations, and helped reunite more than 30 children with their families. The scars she bore became her motivation to ensure that others would not suffer as she had. From the front row, Margaret Thibodeau stood. "I'd like to add something, if I may." She joined Vivian at the podium. "Marie Claire was my great-grandmother. She passed away in 1963, at the age of 78. I knew her when I was young, though she never spoke to me about her early years. But she left behind journals and letters that my family is now prepared to donate to the Louisiana Historical Archives." She unfolded a paper. "There's one passage I want to share," she read. "I have two mothers, and I am blessed by both. Mama Claudine gave me life and never stopped fighting to find me. Mama Josephine gave me safety and opportunity and never stopped fighting to reunite me with my first family. Together, they taught me that love is not diminished by being shared. It multiplies, and they taught me that privilege means nothing if it is not used to help those who suffer." For a moment the audience sat in silence. Then, applause filled the room. After the presentation, Vivian was approached by several people with similar stories, families who suspected their ancestors had been victims of post-emancipation trafficking, descendants seeking to understand mysterious scars and old photographs, researchers working on related topics. But the most meaningful encounter came from an elderly woman who waited until everyone else had left. She introduced herself as Clara Dupas and handed Vivian a photograph in a worn envelope. "This is my grandmother," she said, pointing to a little girl in the picture. Maybe 6 or 7 years old. She was found at a work camp in St. James Parish in 1888. She had marks on her shoulder. M4P. She never found her original family. But maybe with your help, we could try. Vivian looked at the photograph. Then, at Clara's hopeful face. M4P matched the marking on one of the other children rescued from Mercier's house, one of the 2 children whose families Etienne Beaumont had successfully found. "I think we can," Vivian said. "In fact, I think we might already have a lead." She thought of Marie Claire, standing between her 2 mothers in that 1900 photograph, whole and healed, despite the scars she carried. The photograph in Vivian's office, the one that had started her entire investigation, was no longer just an image of concealment. It was a testament to resilience, to the power of persistent investigation, and to the revolutionary idea that families could be built on love rather than blood alone. The scars hidden beneath Marie Claire's lace collar had told a story that waited 129 years to be fully heard. And now, finally, people were listening.